Om Agyanatimirandasya Gyananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namah. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Gadamhayyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamsha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhan Vitamsha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhishcha Kripa Sindhu Bhaevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shrivas Adi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhudale Srimad Bhakti Vedanta Swamin Iti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gaurvani Pracharine Nirvisheshunyadi Pashyadishtani Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Haribol. So we're on chapter 17th of the 10th canto, verses 13 to 25 today. We'll finish the chapter up. As somebody's I'm gonna grab the mic to read the translations. Some context where we are. Mother Prabhupada Priya kindly yesterday she shared to us about the history of Kaliya, the demon Kaliya, and how it is that he came here to this river Yamuna in Vrindavan. And the story goes that he was in the kingdom of the snakes, and the snakes had this contract with God. His natural food is snakes and fishes and living entities like that, and so they had a contract, so he didn't just eat the whole dynasty, that we would give you an offering. We'll give you some offerings, nice offerings. Stop it. Okay. We'll give you some offerings, and in exchange, you won't eat us all. So you eat that. Kind of like that reminded me of the story of Bakasura, right? From the Mahabharata, with the Pandavas in the Ekachakra, where the villagers made a deal with Bakasura. They said, hey, don't eat all of us. We'll make you an offering every so often with the person with it, so you can eat the person as well. And then, so we have this treaty that you won't kill us all. So similarly, Kali had the snakes had the same treaty with Garuda, and Kaliya, becoming very angry and very arrogant based on his power and his venom that he had, he decides to eat that offering. And when Garuda finds out, he gets very angry, and they have a fight, and Kaliya manages to get a little bit of a bite on Garuda, and then naturally as it goes, Garuda wins, and so Kaliya flees, ultimately coming to Vrindavan. So here now we are, after that history, we're going back to the original story of the pastime where Krishna comes back after winning. So we can start from the first translation. 13, 14. Yeah, I can start. Please, 13 to 14, if you can start the translation.
Resuming his description of Krishna's chastisement of Kaliya, Shukadeva Goswami continued, Krishna rose up out of the lake wearing divine garlands, fragrances, and garments, covered with many fine jewels and decorated with gold. When the cowherds saw him, they all stood up immediately, just like an unconscious person's senses coming back to life. Filled with great joy, they affectionately embraced him.
When I read this, I thought it was interesting because when a material body goes into the water, every cologne, every perfume you have kind of washes away. But Krishna, whether he's bathing, whether he's not, the fragrance is a part of his body because it's transcendental. Next verse.
Having regained their vital functions, Yashoda, Rohini, Nanda, and all the other cowherd women and men went up to Krishna. O descendant of Kuru, even the dried up trees came back to life.
Lord Balaram embraced his infallible brother and laughed, knowing well the extent of Krishna's potency. Out of great feelings of love, Balaram lifted Krishna upon his lap and repeatedly looked at him. The cows, bulls, and young female cows also achieved the highest pleasure.
So it sounds like throughout this pastime, Balaram is just having all types of fun, and while the Vrajavasis are crying and weeping and praying, because he knows Krishna's powers.
All the respectable Brahmanas, together with their wives, came forward to greet Nanda Maharaj. They said to him, "Your son was in the grips of Kaliya, but by the grace of Providence, he is now free."
The Brahmanas then advised Nanda Maharaj to assure that your son Krishna will always be free from danger. You should give charity to the Brahmanas. With a satisfied mind, O king, Nanda Maharaj then very gladly gave them gifts of cows and gold.
The greatly fortunate mother Yashoda, having lost her son and then regained him, placed him on her lap. The chaste lady cried constant torrents of tears as she repeatedly embraced him.
O best of kings, Parikshit, because the residents of Vrindavan were feeling very weak from hunger, thirst, and fatigue, they and the cows spent the night where they were lying down near the banks of the Kalindi.
So the translation in the purport, Jiva Goswami is describing how in like spiritual things, there's always an internal reason for doing something and there's an external reason. And in this case, the external reason is that the Vrajavasis are feeling weak from hunger, they're tired, they've been here all day, Krishna's been grappling with the snake, Kaliya, all day. So they're like, let's just rest on the banks today. But the internal reason is now that they have Krishna, they're all together, the whole community has come out, and Krishna is finally with them, they want to spend more time with Krishna. What's the point of going back to your individual houses when you can spend the night with Krishna?
During the night, while all the people of Vrindavan were asleep, a great fire blazed up within the dry summer forest. The fire surrounded the inhabitants of Vraja on all sides and began to scorch them.
Text 22. Then the residents of Vrindavan woke up, extremely disturbed by the great fire threatening to burn them. Thus they took shelter of Krishna, the Supreme Lord, who by his spiritual potency appeared like an ordinary human being.
Vrindavan's residents said, "Krishna, Krishna, O Lord of all opulence, O Rama, possessor of unlimited power, this most terrible fire is about to devour us, your devotees."
O Lord, we are your true friends and devotees. Please protect us from this insurmountable fire of death. We can never give up your lotus feet, which drive away all fear.
Seeing his devotees so disturbed, Sri Krishna, the infinite Lord of the universe and possessor of infinite power, then swallowed the terrible forest fire.
Jai Shri Krishna Bhagavan ki Jai. And I missed it, but in the 24th verse where they're praying that, we're afraid, please save us from death. The Vrajavasis are not afraid of death. The purport describes that if this fire overcomes us, then we will be separated from Krishna. And so what is the use of such separation? We'd rather be with Krishna. So please protect us from this doom. Okay, so our focus verse is 22. So if we can go to 22. Tata utaya sambranta dhaya manava jokasha Krishnam yayusta sharanam Maya manujam ishwaram Tata utaya sambranta Dhaya manavrajaukasha Krishnam yayuste sharanam Maya manujam ishwaram Tata utaya sambranta Dhaya manavrajaukasha Krishnam yayuste sharanam Maya manujam ishwaram Tata utaya sambranta Dhaya manavrajaukasha Krishnam yayuste sharanam Maya manujam ishwaram Tata utaya sambranta Dhaya manavrajaukasha Krishna yayuste sharanam Maya manujam ishwaram Tata upaya sambranta Dhaya manavrajaukasha Krishnam yayuste sharanam Maya manujam ishwaram Tata sambranta Krishnam yayuste sharanam Maya manujam ishwaram. Word to word. Tatha. Then. Utaya. Waking up. Sambhranta. Agitated. Dayamanaha. About to be burned. Vrajokashaha. The people of Vraja. Krishnam. To Krishna. Yayuha. Went. They. Sharanam. For shelter. Maya. By his potency. Manujam. Appearing like a human being. Ishwaraham. The Supreme Personality of Godhead. Translation. Then the residents of Vrindavan woke up, extremely disturbed by the great fire threatening to burn them. And thus they took shelter of Krishna, the Supreme Lord, who by his spiritual potency appeared like an ordinary human being. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The servants of Srila Prabhupada ki jai. The Shruti or Vedic mantras state Swarupa Bhutaya Nitya Shaktya Mayakyaya. The Lord's eternal potency, named Maya, is innate in his original form. Thus, within the eternal spiritual body of the Supreme Lord, there is infinite potency, which effortlessly manipulates all existence, according to the omniscient desire of the absolute truth. The residents of Vrindavan took shelter of Krishna, thinking, "This blessed boy will certainly be empowered by God to save us." They remembered the words of the sage Garga Muni, spoken at the birth ceremony of Lord Krishna. Anena sarva durgani yuyam anjas tarishyata. By his power you will easily be able to cross over all obstacles. Therefore, the residents of Vrindavan, who have full faith in Krishna, took shelter of the Lord in hopes of being saved from the impending disaster threatened by the forest fire. So the class will be cut short a little bit because the camera for FOJ, the cameraman will be coming around 8:15, 8:20. So we'll cut the class a little bit short. Run there. Okay. No, all good. So when I was reading this purport, I think it's really fascinating where on one end, the Rajavasis, they think of Krishna as their darling little child, Yashoda Mai thinks of Krishna as her little baby, and he needs to be protected by her, and in the Damodar Leela he's running, and Yashoda Mai is chasing after him with a stick, and he's afraid. But on the other end, when something catastrophic like this forest fire is happening, they're praying to the same little boy. They're praying to him for protection. We're your devotees. We're your family, loved ones. Please protect us. And if we compare to ourselves, if something's happening in our lives, and if we have kids, we don't suddenly start praying to our kids. Please protect me, Nanvita. Please protect me. That as the parent, it is your job to be the protector. But it is so majestic and it's so mystical that although the Brajavasis completely think of Krishna as their child, he's dependent on us. Without us, how will he eat? How will he do anything? But on one end, when something happens, like when the Gopa boys, they go out and they tackle Aghasura and all these other demons, they know Krishna will protect me. He's my friend, although we're peers, and I can beat him in wrestling. But somehow, when something really bad will happen, it's okay, Krishna's got my back. So it's very fascinating, and so it's described here that this eternal potency, which is the Yogamaya Shakti of Krishna, is actually the one that is doing all the mysticism here. I searched up what it is that the Yogamayas function, because I think we get a lot of katha on material energy, because we live in the material world, and the modes of material nature, and all the functions, and then Adibhot, all the miseries that we get in this world. So we get a lot of Mahamaya Katha. So I was hoping to do a little bit of Yogamaya Katha briefly, especially because FOJ is coming up, Rath Yatra is coming up, and Subhadra Devi is going to go on a tour for Dallas this Saturday. And so Yogamaya, being the internal potency of the Lord, has a few functions, but one of its main functions that Krishna describes himself in the 7th chapter is that it covers his potency, his grandeur, his Aishvarya is covered. And it manifests and unmanifests this. And usually in one front it is between Krishna and his devotees. Because if the devotees think of Krishna as Aishvarya, as Bhagavan at all times, it's very hard in that same time to have the emotion of love, unalterated love just for Krishna. That's not on the platform of awe and reverence. Just like if a parent has love for their child, they have a very informal relationship. This is my child. You can chastise them. You can give them advice. You can give them love as a child. But if that same child, suddenly starts having a relationship of, oh, this is some great person, this is the president, then suddenly you lose that affection, that emotion, and it is. Krishna describes that this is becoming perverted. Yashoda Mai's love for Krishna becomes perverted by Aishwarya briefly when he does the pastime of the dirt eating. So Krishna then smiles, and then the Yogamaya potency covers her again. And so to intensify the emotions and the loving pastimes between Krishna and the devotees, Yogamaya is, again, like it says in this purport, that this eternal potency named Mahamaya, it manipulates all existence according to the omniscient desire of the absolute truth. So it's Krishna's desire to have loving relationships with his devotees. He's tired in Chaitanya Charitamrita. We see that Krishna's inside. He's thinking, the awe and reverence, the feeling of awe and reverence doesn't satisfy me. It's not it's not the taste that I enjoy. I want to have loving relationships where my Gopa brothers think I'm the same as them. We have fun. Yashodamai thinks of him as my little child. Radharani thinks of him as my dear consort. And so, similarly, so Yogamaya, the potency, her job is to intensify this relationship between Krishna and the devotees. And so, speaking of the Vrajavasis, but I'm going to cut something short because I've been given a notice. The Vrajavasis are so great, and so these close associates of Lord that live in Vrindavan, their greatness can be we can describe them as having anya abhilashita shunyam. They have no other desires besides pleasing Krishna. In the Nectar of Instruction, in the verse 10, it's described that the Vrajavasis are completely dependent on Krishna. That makes them above all the karmis and all the gyanis. That is their potency, that is their beauty. And even if we go to Bhagavatam, I'm going to read some Bhagavatam translations, some verses, where after the Brahma Vimohana Lila, where Brahma is praying to Krishna after having realized that, oh, this is Krishna. I did this prank, I tested him, I stole the cowherd boys, I stole the cows, and I tested him, and then Krishna reveals himself as being Krishna and being Vishnu himself. So then Brahma is doing his prayers. And so 10:14, 31 through 35, this is Brahma. The Lord, the creator of this material creation, is describing the glories of the Vrajavasis. 10.14.31, translation. O Almighty Lord, how greatly fortunate are the cows and ladies of Vrindavan, the nectar of whose breast milk you have happily drunk to your full satisfaction, taking the form of their calves and children. All the Vedic sacrifices performed from time immemorial up to the present day have not given you as much satisfaction. 32. How greatly fortunate are Nanda Maharaj, the cowherd men, and all the other inhabitants of Vrajabhumi. There is no limit to their good fortune, because the absolute truth, the source of transcendental bliss, the eternal supreme Brahman, has become their friend. 33. Yet even though the extent of the good fortune of these residents of Vrindavan is inconceivable, we 11 presiding deities of the various senses, headed by Lord Shiva, are also the most fortunate, because the senses of these devotees of Vrindavan are the cups through which we repeatedly drink the nectarian, intoxicating beverage of the honey of your lotus feet. 34. My greatest possible good fortune would be to take any birth, whatever, in this forest of Gokul, and have my head bathed by the dust falling from the lotus feet of any of its residents. Their entire life and soul is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Mukunda, the dust of whose lotus feet is still being searched for in the Vedic mantras. So Lord Brahma is asking that if I could, just like Uddhava, he's asking that if I could just be somewhere in Vrindavan where the dust of the lotus feet of the Vrajavasis is falling on my head, that would be the purpose of my life. 35. My mind becomes bewildered. Lord Brahma, who is our, Brahma Madhva Gaudiya Sampradaya, he's the head of our Sampradaya, is saying that I become bewildered. My mind becomes bewildered just trying to think of what reward other than you could be found anywhere. You are the embodiment of all benedictions which you bestow upon these residents of the cowherd community of Vrindavan. You have already arranged to give yourself to Putana and her family members in exchange for her disguising herself as a devotee. So just for disguising herself as a devotee, Krishna rewards her such a high position of nurse in Goloka Vrindavan. So what is left for you to give these devotees of Vrindavan, whose homes, wealth, friends, dear relations, bodies, children, and very lives and hearts are all dedicated only to you? So this is the glories of the Vrajavasis, that we hear about the pastimes of the Gopas and the Vrajavasis that are at the Ghat, at the Kaliya pastime, where they are so perturbed by Krishna, their dear Krishna, being attacked by a snake and a dangerous serpent. And so this is the glories of these Vrajavasis. And so the question becomes like, how does one reach such a standard of selflessness? Of they've given everything. Brahma is describing their homes. What can Krishna give them? They've given their homes, everything, every inch of their lives has been dedicated to Krishna. And so the question becomes, how does one reach such a standard of selflessness, which is the ultimate goal of Krishna consciousness? We're Gaudiya Vaishnavas, right? So that means servants of Radharani. And we follow the Gaudiya Sampradaya, and that is the Brajavasis. And so this leads us to kind of understand what is our situation right now in this material world. In the Bhagavad Gita, at the end of the 2nd chapter, Arjuna asks Krishna, what are the qualifications of somebody who is fully fixed in Krishna consciousness? Arjuna is asking Krishna, after Krishna has given him the Atmagyan spiel of, you're not this body, you should become fixed, you should do your duty, and then one who is actually better than doing just your duty, you should become fixed in me, and do your action for me. And then Arjuna, he starts asking, okay, so what is the nature, what are the characteristics of someone who is fixed in you? What is that? In Srita Pragya, that is the term, Stitha Pragya. So in 271, Krishna is giving the formula for peace. He describes that a person who has, this is 271, a person who has given up all desires for sense gratification, who lives free from desires, who has given up all sense of proprietorship and is devoid of false ego, he alone can attain real peace. So this, I guess the phrase that I was really interested in was who lives free from desires. And so if we go further into the purport, Srila Prabhupada explains that it's not that one can be free of desires. The soul's, the specific quote, if we go down to the purport, Prabhupada is saying, the living entity cannot be desireless or senseless, but he does have the ability to change the quality of desires. He has to change. So that means that having desires is quite literally the symptom of being alive. To be a living entity means you have desires. So it's not necessarily bad to have desires, because sometimes we blame the action more than the tool. Sometimes we blame the tool than the action it performs. So to have desires is not bad. And we're seeing that, the Vrajavasis, all they desire is for Krishna service. That, how can we serve Krishna? They have no self-desire. So in the material world, we're on the complete opposite spectrum. If there's a spectrum, if the Vrajavasis are here, fully selfless. And the other side, the spectrum is fully self-centered. That's the other side. And so that is the root cause of actually all our suffering, is that we're in the center of our worlds, and for the Vrajavasis, Krishna's in the center of their worlds. Everything is for Krishna. And so back to our point is that, but having desires isn't bad. Sometimes we think that we can artificially repress our desires. But Krishna describes actually in 2.59 that is actually impossible to artificially, once we do sense regulation, if we try to remove the sense objects, the objects of our senses, it's that sense, the desire for sense gratification remains. It doesn't go away. Just because, say I like watching television, if I stop watching television, it's not like the desire for watching television is gone. It doesn't work like that. Just because I have these samskaras, I have these conditionings that I like watching something, by removing it, by removing the sense object, you cannot just function in a vacuum. Because the soul's nature is to desire. Its internal nature is that it likes to serve Krishna. Only thing is, in coming in contact with this material world, that love, those actions become perverted. And so Krishna is saying, just by removing the objects, you cannot achieve peace. Specifically, he says, though the embodied soul may be restricted from sense enjoyment, the taste for sense objects remain. But seizing such engagements by experiencing a higher taste, he is fixed in consciousness. So oftentimes when we hear there's verses where we describe that just by vairagya, one cannot get happiness. This is the point, is that the soul without enjoying something cannot exist. Its nature is to serve, its nature is to do action, perform, and to have desires. So if we remove the sense objects, we cannot alone have happiness. Vairagya means renouncing, right? Renunciation. So vairagya alone cannot bring happiness. The yogic process, if you follow the yogic ladder, it starts out with, you're not this body, and then you purify yourself, and you come to the conclusion that you're the soul. But then if you don't get to the point of, okay, is nivritti, I'm removing. But if you don't attach yourself to something higher, then you won't get the happiness, because the soul's goal of life, the soul's purpose is to serve Krishna. So without attaching yourself onto something higher, nivritti or vairagya or renunciation by itself doesn't accomplish what we're looking for, is savaya pungsam parodharma yato bhakti radhokshaje ahitaki apritihata yayatma suprasiddhati. Yayatma, self-satisfied, completely satisfied, suprasiddhati. So this embodied soul, that we need some higher taste. Renunciation alone does not bring happiness. And so then that kind of leads us to, so what is the problem? So further in the chapter, in the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna then asks in the 3rd chapter, Krishna, what is this sinful thing? What forces us to almost act in sinful ways that pulls us away from you, so pulls us away from what we're supposed to be doing? And Krishna simply says, it's lust only. And so then we have to ask, what is lust? So lust is this, Prabhupada describes in the purport, that lust essentially is that love that we have for Krishna that becomes perverted when it comes into contact with the modes of passion and ignorance. So this desire is very neutral. It's very positive. But when we come into the contact of material nature, this same love for Krishna becomes perverted. It becomes now self-satisfied, self-centered. Before it's for Krishna. Everything is for Krishna. The Rajavasis were the epitome of this on that side. They are completely selfless. But in the material world, we can just look around and look at society, and you can see it's self-interest. Is the only thing that anybody cares about is how can I get more. And the dichotomy is such is that by being self-centered, you will never get happiness. But the material world the material conditioning is so strong. It's always that the grass is greener on the other side. That just at this present moment, I'm not happy. I just don't have enough. But if I had more, then this paradigm, this philosophy of I just need more things or material, I'm the center of this world, and the more I satisfy myself, I'll be happy, then it'll be fulfilled. It just hasn't worked yet. I just haven't reached the point where it's fully works. But it'll work. I promise you it'll work. And so this is what Krishna is telling us, is that lust is like, this lust is not going to go away from you leaving the sense objects. It's not going to go away because it comes from you. We have this thing that lust comes from outside. It is the billboards, it's the television, it's the thing that come from outside is what it's just causing us lust. But Krishna describes that lust sits in the senses, the mind, and the intelligence. So Chaitanya Charan Prabhu gives this example of how this lust is like a virus that conquers the senses, the mind, and then the intelligence. Because technically the intelligence is what strengthens and controls the mind to do the right thing. Because the mind just wants to desire left, right. Is this good? Is this bad? Is this good? Is this bad? The intelligence says, okay, is this good for us? Okay, in the moment the mind says this feels good, this feels bad. But the intelligence is what tells us based on long term, what is shreyas? What is long term good for me? And so this lust comes from many lifetimes of going through samskaras and having experiences and having lusty desires, and it builds up in this consciousness. In our Chaitana, it builds up. And this subconscious is the basis with which we make a lot of our decisions in life. What usually happens is when we come across spiritual knowledge, it comes into our consciousness, but it stays in our conscious mind. But we do most of our actions based on 95% is our subconscious mind, which is modern scientists call the subconscious mind. For us, we understand that's the mind, that's the consciousness over many years. Difference for them is they're thinking on this lifetime. Based on this lifetime, the subconscious mind records all of our experiences. But we understand that this is not from this lifetime. The mind has stored, the subtle body has stored many experiences, all of our experiences from every lifetime ever. And so this conditioning is so strong that the Chaitana is covered by this lust. And this is what prevents us from coming to this conclusion that actually we're spirit. Actually, we're not this body, we're the spirit. And through the spirit, if we can understand that our purpose is to serve Krishna, then we can actually become happy. And so this lust is piled on for many lifetimes. And it's only these desires for self-pleasure or sense gratification the only way this can be cleared is not by giving the things up. Like we mentioned earlier, Krishna says, but just by giving up, it won't work. You can't just, okay, working is really distracting me. It's like if it puts me into the mode of passion, and therefore I'm gonna not work and I'm gonna just serve Krishna all day. No, but Krishna says you cannot just leave. You must do something. You must engage yourself in higher taste according to your faith, according to your conviction. So it's not like we're capable of just leaving everything and sitting in the forest. That's actually very contrary to what Krishna wants us to do, because that was Arjuna's whole argument. Is Krishna, you're telling me to fight. It's gruesome. It's bloody. I feel like I'm just satisfying my senses. And so my next option is like, why just leave all this? I'll just go to the forest. I'll chant japa. I'll chant japa in the forest. And so Krishna's saying, no, Arjuna, what your mindset is based on the bodily platform. You're thinking that if I run away, then therefore I will become purified. But your battle is that you have to perform your activity while doing Krishna, while thinking of me. While your service for me is your dharma. So to do what you want is not dharma, to do what Krishna wants is dharma. So that's Krishna's whole point, is that, Arjuna, you cannot go to the forest and just chant japa, you have to fight. Prabhupada never wanted us to just run away and fight. He said actually, I remember this quote of, most people can't become Haridas Thakur. Haridas Thakur, all he did was chant japa all day. And if you analyze Haridas Thakur's position, he was, because of his physical condition and his, in terms of the body platform, he was born in a Muslim family, so people wouldn't respect his Vani. He was an amazing preacher, but people wouldn't, so his service was not given to preach. And he couldn't go into the temples, he couldn't go to Jagannath Puri, he was not allowed. So then he said, I can only do the service that I'm allowed to do, which is I'll just chant japa. That's the one I can do. Versus he gave Rupa Goswami, go open the temples, go establish Vedic literatures, go establish the Bhakti literatures. Sanatana Goswami, all the Goswamis were given different tasks. But it was all not leave your jobs to go live in the forest and do nothing. It was leave your jobs and you have a higher purpose. So everybody has their different purpose, different dharmas to be done. And in Bhakti, our guru, our spiritual teachers, our mentors, they guide us based on our inclinations as to what it is that we're supposed to be doing. But it's almost never run away and sit in a forest. It's always going to be something which we are capable at this point in time, and it's how can we attach ourselves to the higher purpose. And so how do we cleanse this? We talked about the consciousness has been filled up by so many years of just samskaras and different karmas and different conditionings. And how do we come free from this? And so this Sunday, Jai Gauranga Prabhu went over Chaitanya Charitamrita, and one of these verses where Prabhupada, I noticed that Prabhupada has one of these verses where it's a purport where he just, there's like a series of verses where Prabhupada hasn't said much. And then there'll be one purport he'll hit you with after like 7 or 8 or 10 verses where he's just like, he was angry or he's just really passionate or whatever happened. Prabhupada just decides to give you the whole philosophy from 0 to 1,000. And so this was kind of one of those verses where it's the Gundicha Marjan pastime. Speaking of Rath Yatra coming up this Saturday. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is going through the pastime of Gundicha, and he's cleaning the temple, and it's an analogy for us to clean the consciousness. And then Prabhupada is describing to us the whole philosophy, and this is Madhya 12.135. And this is after Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has almost cleansed the temple, Gundicha temple. And Prabhupada is going from step 1 to step 1,000. He's starting out with saying that this consciousness, our issue in this material world is that we're self-centered. That our goal of life is always centered around material possessions. How can I earn a better living in this material world? And this is due to our many years of conditioning, of our heart being unclean. And it needs to be cleansed. Because Prabhupada, Krishna says, without having some positive engagement, how can you be peaceful? We have to be peaceful. To have love, you have to have peace. And so Krishna says, we must first cleanse the heart. We must cleanse the heart. And the famous verse, Cheto Darpana Marjanam, where Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is telling us that by cleansing this chit, we can change this perverted desire that is covered by lust and uncover it and have it return to its original position of just selfless love for Krishna, having a loving relationship with Krishna. And so Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is telling us that if we continue to chant and hear the pastimes of Krishna, then eventually this intense and vast covering that is the boundary between the soul and the bodily platform, if we can cleanse this consciousness, then the soul we can tap into that soul. That's in the end. Because the desire comes from internally. The soul already has its own set of desires and wants, and the challenge is that the mind and the mode of material nature have perverted this consciousness. That's the wall between the soul. Because the consciousness is nothing but the presence of the soul, right? The soul, the jiva, and then the jiva, from the jiva comes consciousness. And that chaitana is what has become perverted through the contact of the sense objects, the mode of passion and ignorance, and now chaitana it's like a thick wall. And it's like we're cleansing that mirror, right? The analogy is the mirror. The mirror is covered, this chaitana, this heart is covered so much by false bodily conceptions, by material desires, by anarthas, lust, anger, greed. And so by performing bhakti, by performing the devotional service activities, by specifically Srimad Katha Krishna, Punya Shravana Kirtana. By performing Shravana and Kirtana repeatedly, we can cleanse this tendency. So if we are following the train of thought, the soul has desires naturally. Our situation is that these desires have been perverted by lust in coming in contact with this material nature. And so that means the root cause of our suffering is this contact that is happening, and then us falling under this consciousness, the false ego of being this body. And so Krishna is saying that at the root, your problems will not be solved if you heal the root. At the root, the problem is that you have become covered by these anarthas. And so how do we do this? How do we become like the Vrajavasis? It's through following the process that Lord Chaitanya has given us for this age. It's Cheto Darpana Marjanam. Param Vijayate Shri Krishna Sankirtanam. By this holy name, by chanting, by listening to Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita and the literatures that have been provided by Srila Prabhupada and the Acharyas, we are starting to cleanse that desire, this perverted nature of the lust, and this love that has become lusty. And we're starting to turn it around. And we started this class out by talking about Yoga Maya. And so Bhaktivinoda Thakur has a whole, in his Harmonist series of bhajans, he talks about Yoga Maya. He has a whole bhajan for Yoga Maya, for Durga Devi. And I'll just read one verse from it. Might have lost the verse. But essentially what his point was that when the living entity begins to turn itself towards Krishna, then Yogamaya supports this. Yogamaya frees this devotee from anger and fear. So normally when we think of the word Maya, we have a very negative connotation because we're thinking of Mahamaya. She's the one that's like keeps the living entity conditioned and within this material world, and she's poking us with her trident, Adi Bhautik, Adi Devik, Adi Atmik. And so the word Maya is very, it becomes a very negative thing. But we have to understand that Yoga Maya is Krishna's internal potency. And so Bhaktivinoda Thakur is describing for us that the second a jiva begins to turn itself towards Krishna, then Subhadra Devi, Yoga Maya Devi, starts helping. Because the goal of Krishna's, if you remember one of the first sentences in this verse today was that these potencies, this material, this spiritual potency of the Lord, it manipulates all existence according to the omniscient desire of the absolute truth. So the second Krishna has a desire, the potencies start getting to work. They start figuring out how can we solve this, whatever Krishna's desire is. And Krishna's ultimate desire for all of us is to turn towards him. So the second the jivas begins to hearing about Krishna, begins to associate with devotees, this Yoga Maya potency begins to fulfill Krishna's desire. Ultimate desire is that how can all the jivas come to me, relink themselves with me, and connect with me. So then, that's why I remember hearing Nityananda Prabhu one time saying that if we are looking at Jagannath Baladev Subhadra, we better get the mercy of Subhadra Devi, because she is Yoga Maya, and she's the one who helps us in our path back to Krishna. Hare Krishna. We'll stop right there. It is 8:25. I don't know where the cameramen are, but we'll end here. Hare Krishna. Questions, thoughts, concerns, arguments?
Krishna, Abhay Charan Prabhu. It was a wonderful class. I like the point that you mentioned that made me think when you spoke about Srila Haridas Thakur was chanting and how Chaitanya Mahaprabhu gave different services to different Goswamis. That was a wonderful point. So then I started thinking there used to be one of my god brothers always chanting in the temple room. And sometimes it is, it is perceived as if somebody is just chanting and not doing any actual service. It's not taken in a right spirit. But that also relates to, I think, please correct me if I'm wrong, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, didn't he mention one of his disciples used to chant continuously, and one of his disciples went and complained to him that he is not doing any service, just chanting all the time. And I think he made a comment like, even if you paid someone, to chant whole day, all throughout the day, nobody's going to come. So someone who is blessed, someone is blessed with that taste for chanting is really amazing. So that is also, that also should be looked upon as one of the services. That was the point that I was thinking about. Yeah. Thank you.
I think we'll, maybe one more and then we'll wrap up. Welcome to ISKCON Dallas. Welcome to you. Thank you, Prabhu, for sharing. Yeah, I mean, when I reflect on the tendencies of like how certain gurus, certain teachers will, guide the disciple in a certain way. Like if you look at Lord Chaitanya, he always gave different instructions for different people, naturally, because everybody's at different places. For example, Rupa Goswami, Sanatana Goswami, he told them, stay where you are. Behave like almost like an unchaste wife, right? That was the analogy he gave. For somebody, he said, come right now. Leave everything. Raghunath Das Goswami, stay there, support your family, and take your time, and then eventually you'll come. So different instructions for different people, and it's usually it's our mentor who guides us in terms of, at this point in time, with my level of consciousness, with my level of understanding, what is it that I'm supposed to be doing at this present moment? Because we can't just take universal rules. Then what would be the point of the spiritual mentor? What would be the point of a living guru if we didn't need guidance in terms of day-to-day or major events? We could just read the books, just read the Vedas, just read Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavatam, just read, and you'll get all your answers. But it's that somebody who has realized that knowledge has to guide us according to our proclivities, our specific level of surrender and bhakti, what we need to do. Because sometimes, I remember hearing this analogy of like, if our bhakti lata bij is growing, you don't want to put so much water either. Like too much water will make it, it will collapse it, will extinguish this little bhakti lata bij that is growing. So sometimes when in our enthusiasm, we start like, I'm going to chant. I just started 4 rounds. This chanting is so fun. Let me do 16. Let me do 25. Let me do 32. And then you're like, okay, this is terrible. I'm not going to do this. So it's like you doused this little spark that was beginning to turn towards Krishna. We're dousing it by too much. And so how much we should do is usually, then we have to go to our mentors. Somebody that we can ask for guidance, our guru, our shiksha guru. Yes, thank you so much for sharing. Okay, I think we'll... Oh.
I just wanted to give one quick analogy there. It's mentioned, I'm trying to remember who wrote this, but it's about how Yoga Maya and Krishna's Leela is more satisfying to Krishna than anything else. And the story has it that there's this Manjari, and she's watching Radha and Krishna together. So, and there's a couple of the intimate friends of Krishna, cowherd boys are there. And so Radha and Krishna had exchanged their chutters. No. What happens is, okay, so Jyotila, Radharani's mother-in-law, she comes looking for Radharani because she's taken so long. She was supposed to have gone and done something. And so she comes out looking. But there's this Manjari who's standing in the bushes, like outside this area, and she's just so attracted and just thinking it's just amazing when Radha and Krishna are together. And suddenly Jyotila walks up onto her and says, "What are you doing? Who are you looking at?" And then the Manjari looks at Jyotila, and the tendency is, right, to tell the truth. But she forces herself to lie, Jatila, and said, oh, it's just so funny. I'm watching Krishna with Madhu Mangala. But it was Krishna with Radharani, right? So there's an exchange of their chutters. So that like moment of time gave Radha and Krishna the chance that they were able to shuffle Radharani away from Krishna, and they actually put Madhu Mangala there, next to Krishna. Oh, and and then the Manjari went on, lying about it, saying, yeah, it's just so funny because they've put a girl's chutter on Madhu Mangala, and he's acting like one of the gopis. And so then Jotila, that moment, she burst. So she goes, let me see. And she starts looking. And Madhu Mangala has Radharani's chutter wrapped around him. Right? And she says, I know that's Radharani. So he burst in. Jotila burst into this area like that and says, finally I caught you, Krishna. You've ruined every girl in Vrindavan. You're not going to ruin my daughter-in-law, Radharani. Right? And then Madhu Mangala turns around with Radharani's chutter on, and everybody starts laughing. So then Krishna says to her, she said to Jatila, Krishna says, oh my God, why should we listen to you? You have a face like a monkey. So everybody's laughing. But the point that's made, I can't remember what scripture it is, but I think it's Sanatana Goswami in the Brihat Bhagavatam Amrita. He speaks about it, but he says that Krishna actually enjoys those insulting words of Jotila even more than the prayers of the personified Vedas. So,
wow.
It's just to support your point about Yoga Maya and Krishna's Leela. Mm-hmm. There you have it. Hare Krishna.
Jai. Thank you so much for sharing, Prabhu. Hare Krishna. Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Shri Radha Kalachandji ki, Yogamaya ki. Jai.